Hi everyone, Jane here. Thank you so much for watching today and welcome to you all. Today I will be having a play in the new Dina Wakley journal, and this one is a watercolour journal. It is a smaller journal than the previous ones and it is watercolour paper, but it does not say it is cotton, so I'm going to presume it's a cellulose paper. I'll talk more about it as we go through. Now, I also wanted to use the new Maremi book, Collage book, and this one is a Halloween theme. So if you're not interested in Halloween, this is probably not the video for you. And also, if you don't want to see all through the flip through, then you could just fast forward this section. I decided to not do a real-time talk through. I thought I'd just quickly flip through the pages, because for me, Halloween is such a small sort of season of the year. It's not my favourite thing, to be totally honest, but I do love the images in this book. They're more to me cute than spooky, which I quite enjoy. And I do like the autumnal elements of it. And I love the colours that come along. And there's some fabulous background pages in this book as well as the really cute characters, which I think could be used at lots of different times of the year, as I do with my Spooky Personas book. So this one's called Wicked Personas, and that was just a very quick flip through. So I decided to go with this little character here, not particularly scary or spooky or even particularly Halloweeny, apart from the colours and the little sort of bat wings on the hat there. So I cut and slightly tore that one out to put in this book. Now, I'll be cutting this out close to the edge. Now, this Dina Wakley journal is a watercolour one, but to be totally honest, if you are looking for something that is specifically for watercolour, it's probably not exactly what you're looking for. I would say this was more for mixed media, and that is sort of what it is advertised for. It has got, I'll have to have a look, I think it's 300 GSM, the pages, and let me just grab my information. It says it's lightly textured watercolour paper. It's perfect for Dina Wakley products, including the paints and scribble sticks and more. 300 GSM cold press watercolour paper, and the journal is 6 inches by 9 inches. So it does say it's a watercolour journal for mixed media. So if you're looking for something specifically for watercolour, I would say that this probably isn't specifically aimed at you, but it is a nice one for using with lots of different mediums. Now, I decided that I did want to test out its watercolour properties, so to speak. I did notice as I went through the book that it is different textured on its different sides. So I know that that is sometimes an issue for some people. So this page I'm on now, it has got a slight tooth to it. It's slightly textured, but on the back of this page, it was a much smoother, so it gave it more of that hot pressed kind of feel. And I'm just going to guess that's just the way the card is on both sides, and that as the book is put together, it gives you them different surfaces. I also found that this page here, the binding, the stitching in the binding didn't look as secure as I felt it could be. So I did decide to add some washi tape down the middle, and I stuck that on with some glue. Now, I decided I didn't want to do a double page spread, but I did want to test out first of all as well how the paint, the watercolour, would react with this paper. And I also wanted to test out some colours, because I wanted the colours to go with the image that I had cut out of the book. I had also cut out an image from the Industrial Bits and Bobs book as well, and I will list everything in the description box below so you know exactly what I used and the colours. So I started off with these 4 colours, and these were all from the Art Nouveau set by Kuretake. They're the Gansai Tambi paints, and I was sort of just testing out what colours I felt would go with the image. So these were the first 4, and I think they were, I'm going to have to guess, I think one was shadow green, one was greyish blue, one was Mars yellow, and the other one, I'm not sure. This one here is beige grey. I decided I needed a more grey rather than a greyish brown rather than a more browny brown, and I thought that one would be a good to try. And then I remembered that within the granulating set there is the Aurora orange, and it goes down looking sort of a bit of a colour to start with, but it then sort of splits up into, granulates into green and orange, and I thought it would go really nicely, and once it dried it really did. I also thought that maybe what I needed was a brighter orange. So I went to the other Kuretake Gansai Tambi set and found the brightest orange I had, which was this one here. I think it's probably cadmium orange or something like that. But when I put this one down, I found it was still more on the sort of yellowy side. It wasn't that really punchy orange as there was in the image. So that's my swatches there. So I left them to dry, and then I decided to pick the colours I wanted. So these were the 4 that I ended up choosing because I felt they went best with the image. And I wanted to just really test this paper out. So I was going with a really heavy sort of coat of water to start with. And I have to say the cardstock held up really well. Normally when I'm adding paint to a sort of water background for a watercolory look, I am quite random. I decided to sort of try and be a little bit more placed with this one. So I'm going in with the Aurora orange to start with. And I wanted to sort of create some kind of landscapey look behind, so that when the image was on there, it looked like a nice sort of background that she would be standing against. So I went in with a bit of the Aurora orange, and then I'm going in with I do believe it's shadow green. Please do check in the description box because I may be wrong. It might have been a different colour. I think it was shadow green. And I wanted that as the sort of sky. And I'd picked that colour out from the image as well because it was very similar to what was in there with that sort of, it was an industrial sort of vibe. At this point I thought I should really put some paper in to stop the paints, because the paper, as with all watercolour paper, it did start to sort of curl up a little bit just because of the amount of water that I had added to it. I'm then going in with a bit of the beige grey, just again for a little bit of sort of landscapey foreground, and then finally the Mars yellow, just as sort of like a bit of a glow that would be a sort of like a glow in the sky, a Halloweeny glow. And I went with the Mars yellow in the end because the other orange wasn't orange enough. So I thought that if I was going to go with something that wasn't really deep bright orange, then I would just go with this because it had more of that rusty industrial sort of look that went with some of the other bits that I'd added to the page. So I'm just dabbing in bits of colour here and there, and then I will leave the whole thing just to dry, mostly by itself, probably a little bit heat tool to the end. Then I wanted to add something into the background. Now these tissue papers are the Collage papers. They're from Halloween 2024, so last year's Collage papers from Tim Holtz. As you could tell from the pack, I don't use them that often, so I don't feel the need to sort of like buy each year's ones, because these are, you know, these don't go off, they don't go out of date. They, you know, they're just as good this year as they were last year. So I thought this one had a little bit of a sort of spider's web look. I'm not sure if it is a spider's web or not. I think it might be sort of like a mathematical version of a view of a spider's web. So I'm using my Liquitex Professional Matte Medium, which is my favourite matte medium to use. And a little bit of the paint does come up as I'm laying the image on and adding the glue to it, but that didn't bother me because I knew that it was going on to that background anyway. And to be fair, the Kuretake Gansai Tambi I find doesn't lift that much once it's dried onto your page. So I'm using water just to tear around the edges, and there wasn't much to tear away on this. I just wanted to get rid of that bulky bit, and I just wanted to have 2 sections rather than just one big sort of image. I just wanted the 2 parts to be on opposite sides of the page. Now, I also had this little bit of text that was left over from a previous project, I do believe. So I thought that would be quite nice. It sort of goes with that whole sort of vibe of the page. So I just added little snippets of that. I just wanted to use up that little bit and just add a little bit of extra interest and texture into the background. I did debate whether to add some stamping, but I decided that the black from the collage paper was enough. But I did want to add some lightness back in, and I'm going in with this Metal Alpha stencil from Be Crafty and some titanium white acrylic paint, just to add an extra layer of interest and also to lighten up that background a little bit more. So I am really stippling it rather than swirling or anything else. I just wanted to make sure I got a good impression. Then I just wanted to add in my images. So the circle sort of window is the one that's from the industrial book, and then the rest are from the new Halloween book. Now, to talk a little bit about this journal, it held up really well to all the things that I threw at it. So I had on there tissue, collage, I had matte medium, I had acrylic paint, I had watercolour, and once it had dried out from the watercolour, it went back to being really nice and flat. In terms of being a watercolour journal, I think if you were looking specifically for something for watercolour, I think you could find, for the price of this journal, I think you could find better quality actual watercolour journals. For example, I have recently bought another Etcher cold pressed sketchbook, which I think has about the same amount of pages. It's slightly bigger than this in the B5. And on Jackson's, it was on offer for £30, just over £30. I think it's gone back up now, but to be fair, even at full price, it's £36. This journal that I'm working in today with the Dina Wakley one was £32.99. I don't know how that converts in other countries, and it may be that they're more or less depending on how easy they are to get hold of. But if I was looking for a proper watercolour paper journal, I would probably go for the Etcher, because I know that Etchers are viewed as being, quite high-priced sketchbooks. But compared to this journal, I think they're on a par with the price. And so if you wanted actual 100% cotton watercolour paper, because you were going to do something a lot more watercolory, then that is the way I would go. However, if you are looking for something, of this size and you have the budget, then this is a perfectly good, journal. I do love Dina Wakley's journals. I love the Ledger journal, and I loved her previous journals because they were something a little bit different. I'm not sure whether you could get something similar at probably a lower price. I'm not sure. So I'll leave that up to to you to think about what you want and what you would need. I am now adding on some of the Stabilo Aall pencil, and it's just to add a little bit of shading and shadowing. And as always with this, I do struggle a little bit with this pencil for some reason. I don't know why. I find the Inktense, I don't know why I didn't just go straight to Inktense. What I did do in between that I didn't show actually was that I did add a layer of clear gesso over the top of my images, because I did know that I have had a mixture of the paint and the matte medium, and I wanted it to provide a nice sort of universal, I don't think that's the word, but you know, a continuous surface that was all of primed for me to add this on top of, which meant that the pencil goes down nicely and it spreads nicely. I just find it a bit of a tricky pencil to use quite often, but it does give a nice effect, and so I'm just sort of persevering with it, and just to get a bit of shading. And I only went round the bottom parts of the image. I didn't worry about adding it all the way around the whole thing. I wanted to add a sentiment that was on black with white writing, because I felt it would stand out better on the page. So I've gone with this one from Lemon Creation, and it was one big strip. I just cut it down into two parts just to fit onto that side of the page a little bit better. Now, I did feel it needed some splatters, of course, and because it is a sort of a Halloweeny theme, I've gone with black, and it's the Winsor & Newton ink, and I just wanted to cover her face. And I also decided to cover the sentiment because I didn't want spots falling onto the words, which would make it more tricky to be able to read them. So I'm just using one of my brushes here. I tend to use one of my cheaper brushes, so to speak, and rather than a really more expensive brush, because I just feel that because it's an ink, I know sometimes it clings into those bristles a bit, and then just removing these. And here is the final piece. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please do give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already subscribed, you could give it a giving it a subscribe would be really helpful. And if you're able to, if you could hype the video, that would be fabulous as well. It doesn't cost anything and it really helps. At the end, you will see a list of my lovely members as well, so thank you to them. And until the next time, bye bye.